Hello and welcome to Matters Rising 3 answers. Just quickly step through the various questions posed. Hope you enjoyed them. So this first question about the arms landed at Kilcool, which ship completed that operation, this caused most problems. So I highly recommend Lorcan and Collins' book on the 1916 rise and just go through that, the various ships involved in the movement of arms and the various crews as well. So the answer to this question was the Chota. Asgard was the ship involved at Howth. My accent's usually way off with all of that sort of stuff. Gladiator was involved in the transportation. This was the ship that was used to transport the arms from Germany, and then they were distributed to the Asgard and to the Kelpie. And later on, the Kelpie was, or the arms on the Kelpie were moved across to the Chota. So Chota for that particular answer, or that particular question. Arthur Griffiths, he wasn't held at Frongok, definitely. Few prisoners were held at Usk. I think De Valera was later held at Lincoln. Griffiths was held in Reading, probably more famous as being the prison where Oscar Wilde was held. And if I remember right, he was prosecuted by Edward Carson. McNeill was arrested following the Easter Rising. He didn't get a large fine or the death penalty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Okay, didn't expect too many correct answers on this, but people didn't do too badly. Don't expect most people to be too interested in World War One and everything else going around. The answer to this particular question was Henry Hanna. At the time, he was a King's Counsel. He was also a member of the Irish Association of Volunteer Training Corps. He wrote The Pals at Suvla Bay. He later went on to be a judge in the Irish Free State. William Wiley was another legal person involved in the Easter Rising. He was involved in the prosecutions following the Easter Rising. He also went on to be a judge in the Irish Free State. Frank Browning was involved in legal matters. He was in the land registry, if I remember correctly. However, he didn't survive the Easter Rising. He was killed on the first day of the Rising. He was second in command of the Irish Association of Volunteer Training Corps. He had been heavily involved in recruitment for the 7th Battalion. And there's a very nice picture of himself and a whole range of the guys who were recruited for this unit in Lansdowne Road before they went off to Gallipoli. John Nyland was dead before the Easter Rising. He was a Justice of the Peace, originally from Roscommon. He did, however, have 2 sons involved in the Easter Rising. Gerald, who was killed on day 1, he served with the 10th Battalion, the Royal Dublin Fusiliers. He was killed crossing the bridge, heading towards the Mendicity, and he's buried in Glasnevin Cemetery. His brother, Arthur, was a member of the garrison at the Forecourt, so he was in the Irish Volunteers. He survived the Easter Rising. He is buried in the same grave as Gerald in Glasnevin. There were another couple of other brothers, 2 involved in the Royal Army Medical Corps, and another brother who was over in Seaham in England, again working as a doctor. But the answer to this question, Henry Hanna. Martial law was finally declared in Dublin on the 26th of April, so a couple of days after the start. A bit slow by the British, but I suppose they were caught on the back foot. I was in 2 minds about whether to put this in. This is a bit of a technical question if you're interested in guns, and I know quite a few people who do these sort of quizzes are. But actually, surprisingly, quite a few people did very well on this one. So the British Enfield Mark III rifle is the one that was being produced before 1916. it's been produced before the war. It had this nice little feature here. It's cut off. Normally, British soldiers would load in 10 rounds using two chargers with five rounds each. They would load them into the magazine through the recess here, or the opening here. The the cut-off would then be closed to basically make that a reserve of ammunition, and then it could be used to insert a single round at a time until such time as, they need to go into quick fire mode, open up the cut-off, and then they can do rapid fire or quick fire. It changed around 1915, 1916, and the British then started producing the Enfield Mark III Star that didn't have a cut-off, so you just load 10 rounds in and that's it, quick fire, away you go. So there's a bit of a change of usage. Part of the reason I'm interested in this is there's references in the actions of the King's Own Scottish Borderers at Bachelor's Walk that mention soldiers dropping individual rounds. And that's making me think that they're either using a Lee Enfield with a cut-off, either with the 10 rounds in the magazine or empty. I suspect empty, but it sounded to me like the Bachelor's Walk incident, this was a device that would have been used. I have to thank Mick O'Farrell for this particular one. This came up in one of his books. So at the time, there was a difference between Dublin and Greenwich Mean Time. We were 25 minutes behind Greenwich Mean Time. I don't know if British soldiers landing in Dublin or Kingstown at the time knew that. There's certainly no references that I've seen to it. But potentially you could have British accounts given a totally different time to Irish accounts. So that's why I'm particularly interested in that. There was definitely a time difference at 1916. I always feel sorry for Willie. He got a real raw deal being executed. He was actually a lot older than many people think. He always seems to be placed as being, on the coattails of Patrick. But he was 34. His own man, able to make up his own mind. And obviously, while he was, very supportive of Patrick, etc., he didn't really hold a command position, and he didn't really end up shooting any British soldiers or civilians or anything like that. So hard to really understand why he was executed, other than the fact that he was Patrick Pearse's brother. But yeah, 34, a lot older than many people think. Okay, again, a bit of a technical question, but one that sort of addresses again a myth. You'll see a lot of references in presentations, etc., witness statements to incendiary shells. There were no incendiary shells in Dublin in 1916. That's an absolute myth. The only shells available to the artillery were the shrapnel shells. And a shrapnel shell is filled with these sort of round musket balls. The shell will be fired. It was supposed to explode above people. This is an anti-personnel shell. And the idea, these would spin out and, like the old Napoleonic Wars, cause lots of injuries as a result of these metal, I think they're metal balls flying off and causing injury and mayhem. While there were high explosive shells available or being produced in 1915, they were needed up at the front. With the move to trench warfare, the 18-pounder artillery was being converted away from anti-personnel to, we need to blow up the German trench, we need to blow up a German pillbox, etc. So high explosive was much needed in the Western Front, etc. So the guys in Athlone who were doing the training, they only had shrapnel available. Okay, Chief Secretary at the time of the Easter Rising was a guy called Augustine Birrell. Quite a liberal guy, did quite a bit for Ireland in terms of things like old age pensions, that sort of stuff, and a bit with education. Tried to hold back the more hardline people from arresting Irish volunteers, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was Augustine Birrell. He was in London at the time of the Easter Rising. His representative in Dublin at the time was Matthew Nathan. He was in Dublin Castle when the rising started. Lord Winborne, definitely a hardliner. He was the viceroy based over in Phoenix Park. And of course, General Maxwell arrived later in the week, took over command of the troops in Ireland, and ultimately took on the role almost like a military dictator, and was responsible for the court-martials and ultimately then the executions. Hope that was useful. I'll try and get Matters Rising 4 up and online fairly soon. Thank you very much. Hopefully you're finding this interesting. Always welcome feedback, and if you think I've got anything wrong, always let me know as well. Thank you very much.